Good afternoon, everyone from Australia, or good morning down under here. So you should all be proud of yourself. I think you have, as a group, raised such a great awareness on conservatorship, we call guardianship, and administration in Australia. It is not an old person's affliction. This is not something in Australia we see only happening to our elderly. We have a generous social security system here in Australia, which anyone from a child to basically an elderly person can tap into. And what we are seeing quite commonly in Australia is a predator system that is basically targeting our most vulnerable people. I appeared on nationwide TV the other day in regards to a 22-year-old deaf girl who was snatched from her home, and no one has seen a capacity assessment on this poor girl. I actually spoke to the family. I typed. The girl's only form of communication is via text. She does not want to live in a group home. We are seeing predators in Australia targeting young, vulnerable victims and locking them away, isolating them away from their families. And isolation is the key here. There are two very important points that I would like to make. And I loved hearing everyone talking about the court systems and capacity. They are both very key in this to understand. Firstly, Brittany, under the law, is dead. She doesn't exist. Under the law, she doesn't exist. She physically exists, but she has been usurped. Identity fraud, you can call it anything you like. Someone else is controlling everything about her, where she lives, who has access to her, whether she has access to her children, her medical, whether she lives or dies. These are very serious. Her money, her 401s, her car, anything she purchases, every part of her life has been taken over. She physically is here with us, but legally she's dead. And how scary is that? That is the most scariest thing, but it's true. And we see in Australia young children as well being targeted. And there is a process here. The two issues that concern us is a lack of due process. You have a very good court system in America. In Australia, you can lose your basic human rights in a tribunal, not a judge. Just a social worker could appear. Anyone could make any allegation, throw you into a system, and a person who has complete immunity can ignore evidence in front of them, act in any way they see fit under the law, can take away your basic human rights. And you cannot even appeal in Australia. You can only appeal on a question of law. So if they've made a mistake under the law, now they have in Australia worked out such a fine art. It's such a perfected art where victims can't even appeal. So you are perpetually stuck in a system that someone owns you. And the second problem that we are seeing are capacity tests. Who assesses capacity? How have they assessed capacity? What areas of the brain are they looking at when they assess capacity? I've heard the word commonly in regards to Brittany, highly functioning. She can dance, she can sing, there's no reason why this young, vibrant lady has a conservatorship over her. However, there are invisible illnesses and temporary illnesses. So in many cases, there might be a temporary illness. However, the conservators profit from the capture. Once people like Brittany, anyone is captured, very rarely do they escape, in particularly where there's money involved. It's a very profitable system. They feed off the estate. And this poor lady fighting these conservators, they will use her money, her own funds, to fight her, to keep her trapped in the system. So it becomes a vicious circle. So think of a hamster or a rat on a wheel just running round and round and round. You're constantly in a circle, going round and round, and she cannot escape. And that is the problem we are seeing. And the Free Brittany movement has exposed the flaws, what we call guardianship or conservatorship. And you should all be proud that you are participating and possibly changing the laws, not only for our young, but also our elderly, who many have capacity to make decisions and are not given that chance. And the other question you have to look at is, we all age, or we all can suffer temporary illnesses, or we have impairments in certain decision makings. That does not mean every aspect of your life needs to be controlled. And doctors need, you can walk into a clinic, they can look at someone and say, oh, you've lost capacity, but they don't actually define what areas you've lost capacity. There are generally 6 areas that you have to look at: memory, attention, executive functioning is very important, language, theory of mind in particular, and it escapes me at the moment, but there's another area, visual construction. So they look at a competent doctor will look at all these areas and then decide, okay, you can make decisions here, you can't make decisions there. Now, from what I see in Australia, Brittany would not be under guardianship in terms of her accommodation, access. If she could marry, she would be allowed to do that. There would be a question over her finances, but given her predicament and given the fact that she has quite a substantial portfolio, she does not need what's called substitute decision making. That is, someone taking over her whole life and telling her what they can do. She needs support in those areas. Now, unless you're an accountant like myself, most people need some guidance with their finances. She is in a great position to hire managers, to hire lawyers, to hire accountants that can guide her where she should invest, what she should do. And that's all she really, in my opinion, requires. What we have, though, is a group of lawyers profiting from this system, generously, I might add, and they have basically taken control completely of her life. To do this effectively, and we see this time and time again, once a conservatorship is placed over someone like Brittany, we see isolation tactics take over. Isolation is very important, physical and mental, because many people that are guardians, they need full control, and they don't like their captor taking over or complaining or having the ability to challenge the order. So we see this often. So a process begins of isolating very vulnerable people. You can be vulnerable, but you can still make decisions. And that's a mistake a lot of people make. We're all vulnerable at some point. We've all been vulnerable. We've all made mistakes. We've all fallen in love with the wrong person. We've all given money to friends who have never paid us back. That does not require somebody jumping in and saying, you need a conservator. You need someone to take over. To take over someone's life, you need full evidence. You need evidence of executive dysfunction, that this person's judgment is impaired to such an extent that they cannot make those decisions anymore. And the evidence that I'm seeing in regards to Brittany is that is not the case. This seems to be a profit from the capture, in my opinion, arrangement. It's concerning. It is happening all over the world, in Australia, in America, in Canada, Japan, Norway. We are seeing this common thread. Funnily enough, we don't see conservatorship when it comes to homeless people and people who don't have money. We see it often, people who have lots of money being targeted by very concerned people who profit from being the guardian. And this guardian, they commence a process of isolation. And the reason why physical isolation is important is because they need to cut off that individual from the world, from their surroundings, in order to control them. It's a cult. We start to see cult tactics employed. So once you isolate someone, you start to create fear, dependency. You start to make them powerless. This is a process. And how do you do that? Well, someone like Brittany, for instance, if I was a guardian, I would use her children as a tactic. I would use fear. I would use her brand model. I will publicly humiliate her to the point she withdraws from society. This makes her dependent on her captors. Stockholm syndrome. I'm sure everyone's heard of Stockholm. Dependent on her captors. Create that fear, keep it going, and then keep her unaware about her surroundings, that she's loved, that there are people there who are concerned for her. There are people there who would like to step in and help her. She has none of that from what I can see. And what was interesting watching the documentary Framing Britney, what concerned me at some point last year or the year before, she was forcibly institutionalized for a period of time. Now, to me, it became apparent she was challenging the system. She started to challenge, she started to speak up, and that could not happen. The powers that be, whoever it was, I don't know, all of a sudden, she was put into a home. And that is commonly seen in cults. They isolate and they commence a process of dependency. And I think that is my main concern here, that has been cut off, and it's such a bubble. And looking at her life, looking at the abuse that she has sustained in the media, who would not have a temporary breakdown? But this temporary breakdown has become a lifelong prison for her. And that's what is concerning. Who is assessing her? Where are her doctors? Where are the reports? Dementia, unless she has frontal lobe dementia, it doesn't appear that she does. Her judgment seems quite, people with frontal lobe dementia appear well. They can speak. They often don't have a memory problem. They often don't have a language problem. But in a continued form, say within 5 or 10 minutes, you can see judgment issues. You can see impairment in thinking, erratic behavior, manic behavior. I have not seen that anywhere in any of the shows for long periods of time. I do not know who has diagnosed this poor woman. Who are these doctors? Who handpicked them? And we often see guardians and doctors and lawyers working together like a pack of wolves, like a pack of wolves. It's almost like a Richard Attenborough documentary. You see these wolves attacking an individual, and there's this person there. And this is what we're seeing here. And they work in a pack, and they target vulnerable people. And these vulnerable people often don't even know what has happened to them. And they are thrown into a court or tribunal that, in my opinion, from all the cases that I've seen, including my own, they are guilty, and they are fighting to prove their innocence. The presumption of innocence is gone in many conservatorship roles. Often people do not attend their own hearings. They are denied representation. Their money is used against them. Allegations are not tested. This is very important. Anyone can throw a diagnosis. You have dementia, you have schizophrenia, you have bipolar. So what? Many people have illnesses. There are many disabled people. Many loved ones I have do not have guardianship orders over them, and they have severe disabilities. We need to break from that. We need to introduce more of a supportive role, accept anyone who has a disability, but have a supportive role. Always it should come down to support. Substitute decision making should always be a last resort when a person is going to harm themselves or harm others in society. That's it. In Britney's case, she could easily access the best teams around her and live a normal, functioning life. Look, this illness that was temporary has become a permanent prison, and many people are profiting from this capture, in my opinion.